Good morning. I'm Chief Wendell Franklin with the Tulsa Police Department. I want to start out by saying that, first off, the most accurate information, the most proper information is going to come from one source, and that's the Tulsa Police Department. We at the Tulsa Police Department, we grieve with the families after this senseless tragedy. We grieve with the co-workers, and we pray. We pray because we all need prayer. I cannot begin to thank the men and women of the Tulsa Police Department for the immediate response that they had to the incident yesterday. Our training led us to take immediate action without hesitation. That's exactly what officers do, and that's what they did in this instance. They had the right mindset framed and went into action and did a tremendous job. The other first responders that came to the scene, the Tulsa Fire Department, Oklahoma Highway Patrol, Tulsa County Sheriff's Office, the St. Francis Security Team, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, United States Marshal Service, Tribal Police, and other federal and local agencies all responded and descended upon 61st and Yale yesterday. This was not done. This was a coordinated effort. It was not done haphazardly. I also have to thank the dispatchers and call takers at our 911 center that reacted as they were trained. Law enforcement across the nation is dealing with increased violence among people. This is yet another act of violence upon an American city. I will say that as a Tulsa police officer, we train, and we train. And we train for instances such as this. And I'm overwhelmed and proud of the men and women, all those that responded yesterday. Now, I want to take some time and go over the timeline with you as we know it today. This information is fluid and can still change, but it is the most accurate information that we have at this point. Before I do that, let me go ahead and provide the names of the victims, and I will allow St. Francis to elaborate more on those victims. We have Dr. Preston Phillips, Dr. Stephanie Huson, Amanda Green, William Love, and our suspect, Michael Lewis. On May 19th, Michael Lewis went into the hospital for a back surgery. The performing physician was Dr. Preston Phillips. Mr. Lewis was released on 5/24, May the 24th. After release, Lewis called several times over several days, complaining of pain and wanted additional treatment. On May 31st, Dr. Phillips saw Mr. Lewis again for additional treatment. Yesterday, June the 1st, Lewis called Dr. Phillips' office again, complaining of back pain and wanting additional assistance. Now, we know through the help of our ATF and their gun tracing that at 2 p.m. on June the 1st, Mr. Lewis purchased a semi-automatic rifle from a local gun store. That semi-automatic rifle was an AR-15 style rifle. We know that Mr. Lewis purchased a semi-automatic handgun, a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson pistol, on May the 29th from a local pawn shop. I now want to go into the shooting timeline. At 4:52 p.m. on June the 1st, a third party who was on a video chat off location with an on-location doctor called 911, saying the doctor told her to call 911, saying there has been a shooting. At 4:53 p.m., we received a 911 call about a shooter in a building. We then continued to receive multiple calls that were more specific on a shooter being on the second floor of the Natalie building on the campus of St. Francis Hospital. At 4:55 p.m., a person called and clarified the Natalie building as the scene of the shooting. The first Tulsa police officers arrived 1 minute later at 4:56 p.m. I want to give some context on the Natalie building. The Natalie building is a 5-story medical office building with numerous offices, rooms, hallways, and so forth. It is an exceedingly complex environment. A tactical situation for an officer to deal with is pretty complex. Officers entered the building on the first floor and made their way to the second floor based on the information they received. While on the second floor of the vast building, officers began yelling, "Tulsa Police." This is something that we train to do. As officers were calling out Tulsa Police and advancing towards a suspect location, they heard a gunshot. We believe that was the final gunshot, with the suspect taking his own life. The gunshot was at 4:58 p.m., approximately 39 seconds after the first officers entered the building. As officers started clearing the building, they came across a victim that was down in the exam room. Officers requested IMSA to the floor and continued searching for the suspect. This victim later died at the hospital. We found the suspect, and we rescued a female who was hiding under a desk at the suspect's foot. She was there when the suspect took his life. She did not appear to be injured. Officers rescued that victim who was hiding under a desk, but officers also located another deceased victim next to the shooting suspect. Officers continued to search the building for victims or additional suspects and came across another victim that was down in an open area near a nurse's station. At this point, officers began directing first responders, IMSA, and fire to those victims to render first aid. Again, this is something that we work cooperatively with, and we can go into what we call a hot environment with medical personnel and fire personnel and start rendering aid. In that same room there was the victim was at, officers also rescued an elderly female that was in the room. As officers continued to clear the building, they located Dr. Phillips deceased in an exam room. As officers continued to clear the building, they removed multiple witnesses and victims and escorted them from the building. As more officers arrived on scene, we began a methodical search of each floor of the 5-story structure, looking for witnesses and/or victims. Thus far, we have recovered 30 .223 casings from the crime scene. We have also recovered 7 .40 caliber casings from the crime scene. We have also found a letter on the suspect which made it clear that he came in with the intent to kill Dr. Phillips and anyone who got in his way. He blamed Dr. Phillips for the ongoing pain following the surgery. At 5:24 p.m., we received a call from the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office, and that dispatcher told us a woman on the line whose name they did not have called saying that her husband had killed several people at Dr. Phillips' office. This would have been a half hour after the event occurred. We received 2 follow-up phone calls from the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office providing clarifying information. All of this information was after the fact. Once the scene was secure, the Tulsa Police homicide and crime scene detectives began working the scene. They continued work until 3 a.m. this morning. We have now turned that scene back over to the hospital staff at St. Francis. I cannot emphasize enough that we train rigorously over and over and over again for not if, but when, because we have seen the violence that has taken place throughout the United States. And we would be naive not to think that that would not happen in our jurisdiction. So again, to the men and women of the Tulsa Police Department, Oklahoma Highway Patrol, all of the surrounding jurisdictions that descended upon the scene yesterday, I offer a heartfelt thanks, and I hope that each and every citizen that sees an officer today thanks an officer today, because this job is hard, it is difficult,